Welcome back, everybody, to the Blue and Gold podcast. This is your host, Joffrey Whiteside. And today we have the privilege of speaking with Nick Deterding, who owns his own construction company here in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. Nick, introduce yourself to the GOATs and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me. Like Joffrey was saying, Nick Deterding, currently the owner of Deterding Construction, which is a custom design build general contracting firm. Um, we're tailoring most of our work towards a what we call a white glove service nowadays, and we've been I've been building and working in construction since I was 8 years old, with my dad in Central Kansas, and I've just always had a passion for building things, always tinkering in the shop. Went to the Naval Academy, joined the Supply Corps, and got out after 5 years to continue my passion for building.
Awesome, awesome. So, what did you major in at the Naval Academy?
So I got a systems engineering degree with a concentration in robotics.
Okay, awesome. I was
And,
an engineering major as well. So
okay,
now, have you used that at all in the outside life?
believe it or not, I've used it a little bit, but not in the terms of robotics. I
Yeah.
use the statics, the dynamics, for load points, when it comes to constructing a house.
Okay.
I've used that a lot. I've scared a lot of structural engineers that I've worked with, because they're like, "Oh my gosh, this guy actually knows what he's talking
Yeah,
about."
yeah, that's awesome.
So I've used it a little bit, but as far as the coding and all of that, barely any.
Okay, I got you. So you said graduated the academy and went supply.
Mhm.
So talk a little bit about supply officer world. You're our first supply officer, so it's like the pressure's on you. If you don't do well,
Oh
then
yeah.
all the suppos out there are gonna send you hate mail. So
Well, I don't know if I am necessarily the ideal supply officer, for the Navy, because I went supply corps and then ended up as the assistant suppo at a SEAL team,
okay,
and a lot of suppos don't like greenside suppos because we are very relaxed. We're not necessarily breaking the rules, but we bend the rules. We're always trying to get to yes, and it's a very relaxed environment, until you get out on deployment. Then everything's running at 1,000 miles an hour. Um, but it actually set me up very well for going into contracting, because we would contract out a lot of trainings, a lot of special materials and supplies for guys. So it was a nice lead into what I do now. Um, yeah, that's about what I got for that.
yeah, yeah. So me personally, I think like supply is one of those things that translates well into like the outside world, right? As a SWO, that's what I always did. I look for jobs that would help me and skills that will help me in the outside world. That's why I picked, training officer. Like you're talking to everybody
Mhm.
and everything like that. So how do you think those skills translated into, owning your own company, essentially?
So the biggest thing, at least where I lucked out, was the on the green side of logistics. A good majority of everything that we handled was contracted out. Nowadays, being a general contractor, that is, that's like 80% of my job, is going through contracts, making sure that everything is covered. In case a subcontractor screws up a project, how is the client going to be covered? It also comes into scheduling, making sure that schedules are perfectly aligned, where we're having materials dropped off, a couple days prior to them being needed. Um, and then the other thing too is the financials.
Hmm.
That I'm no accountant by any means, but I had enough experience, managing budgets for the team that I was working for, that okay, I feel comfortable now forecasting where money is going to be spent. Um, and being able to, really see, okay, yeah, we just got an invoice from a client, and great, the bank account looks great right now. Oh wait, we got to remember though, we have a window package that we're going to end up paying for here soon. That's going to be $20,000 that is going to come out of the bank account in a hurry.
Yeah.
And especially for something like windows, there's a huge long lead time for those. So it's the supply logistical world has definitely helped me out with scheduling, being able to time things in a way for having that job site efficiency, and even on the backside of managing the business, being able to forecast the financials, look at, again, scheduling, so that way you don't have 2-3 jobs all stacked up right on top of each other.
Yeah.
And you can kind of space them out, so that way you can keep the jobs rolling, and not have one job sitting at a standstill for months at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Which kind of makes sense, because as a supply officer, you're communicating with, people, I say outside the ship, because, I'm used to being on ship. So off of the ship, right, you're communicating with civilians, you're communicating with other, military members, while still communicating with, in your case, it was a SEAL team, right?
Yep.
So just, the different aspects of communication, which I think is like super important in any type of business and anything in life. So I personally know a lot of supply officers, and they always get out and work like these big corporate jobs, making a lot of money. What made you, choose that path of entrepreneurship?
It was the fact that I had just, like, any off time that I had outside of the Navy, I was tinkering in my shop, I was building something, I was remodeling my own house. And no matter how stressful, like, a remodel project was going, it was still something that I could wake up to, and, like, instead of dreading it, it was, this is fun for me. I can go into, what a lot of people in the entrepreneur world talk about, it, the flow state.
Yeah.
That's, I fall into that all the time when it comes to building. Just throwing on the radio and just going to work.
Yeah.
That's what led me to, being an entrepreneur. I did actually try to go work for another builder, an academy grad from, I think, 94.
Okay.
Who is, building, mega mansions down in South Florida.
Okay, that's awesome.
And it was a great experience. Unfortunately, I butted heads too much with his sons.
Yeah.
When it came to leadership, like management styles, that I figured, I don't want to ruin, the mojo that they had going on with their company. So I was like, all right, I'll come back to Virginia, because I still had my house.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'll just, continue doing my own thing. And now, having that experience, I know how I want to actually run my company to emulate what they were doing. And, there were some things that I saw that I would like to do different and hopefully do better.
Yeah.
And so it's just been one of those things where I've tried to go work for other people. And whenever I have tried to bring up, here's an idea that I think would make us more efficient, and it gets shot down, it kind of puts like
the Navy. That happens in the Navy a lot.
Happens all the time in the Navy. It's like, I've got a great idea, and it would help us significantly, and it gets shot down. It's like, well, then why am I working so hard for this if it's just going to get shot down?
Yeah.
So now it's kind of the direct correlation of, my success will come with, how much hard work I put in, and that's just been one of the things that has kept me going.
Yeah.
Knowing, hey, why am I struggling financially right now? Oh, well, we've been delayed on projects for, a couple weeks now. There's nothing that you can bill out. So what could I be doing to fill that time instead of just sitting at home drinking a soda?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You talked about a little bit about supplies. So you started your company, I think it was like 3 years ago?
It was May of 2021.
Okay, yeah, because I remember like the Facebook post, and I was like, "Who's this guy?" And I think I even like reached out to you.
You
So
did, yeah.
That's awesome. It's definitely exciting to see like how much you like grew and everything like that. So just talk a little bit about the supply chain, right? It got disrupted with COVID, right? And
Absolutely.
you started a company right in the middle of that. So talk about like those challenges.
So whenever COVID gets brought up in the construction world, it obviously was a terrible thing for the global economy. However, the way I see it was a blessing in disguise. I was forced to stay at home, which allowed me to remodel my entire house at the time that I was, supposed to be remote working. But when you're sitting there just waiting for something to come through the email, well, I'll just go spend, an hour working on the flooring in my house or whatever it was. So COVID was a huge blessing for me because I was able to gain a lot of fundamental experience in trades that I wasn't super familiar with. Because growing up, working with my dad when I was young, it was roofing, carpentry, nothing when it came to plumbing, electrical, HVAC, any of that.
Yeah.
So that's where I took the time to, instead of hiring a plumber, which, plumbers, they charge a lot, but it's a skilled trade. I just told myself, all right, I'm gonna learn it myself.
Yeah.
So during COVID, I taught myself basic fundamentals so that way I could smartly talk to my trades. That way they see a younger contractor, a younger GC, and they don't go, oh, I can take this guy for all the money that he's bringing in on this project.
Yeah.
And a lot of trades now, they've respected that, and I'm even still today learning from them. But COVID really put a huge hit on, ordering materials, even pricing jobs.
Yeah.
It was normally whenever I would price out a job, I can kind of go with background historical data of, okay, I can frame a house for, $32 a square foot and be able to be within the ballpark for that number. But you go and you try and assume that price during COVID when a 2x4 was all the way up at $9 a stud, and it's like, well, my number is completely off now.
Yeah.
So how do I adjust for that? And luckily, because of COVID, I mean, it takes a lot more work on the end of a GC, because now we have to go basically build out a material list and send it off to a vendor to quote out, instead of just assuming a certain price and sending off an estimate to a client.
Yeah.
So it slows down the communication between the GC and the client. But in the background, or like I'm always on the phone with vendors, from all over the place.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing that COVID did, and this is where, I've been trying to educate more people on it, is it has significantly driven a wedge into the professional contractors and the guys that got bored, figured out, oh, I know how to put in flooring.
Yeah.
But they've only got maybe like a couple months of experience actually doing it. That it, again, it drove a huge wedge there, because now we're seeing, from my perspective, I'm getting beat out by guys that have less experience than me because they're charging less. But when I look at their finished products, it's like, well, that's not that great.
Yeah, the quality isn't as good.
Exactly.
It's not gonna, I've dealt with like horror stories from. I try to keep my clients away from really bad rehabs, because I mean that can cost thousands and thousands of dollars at the end of the day. So I think it's really important to pay for that, that quality and experience, because A, it's gonna last longer, and B, you're not gonna have to go back and fix things and things like that. So that's pretty awesome.
And just one more thing with that too is when people see, oh, hey, this guy is cheaper by $2,000, let's say, they don't see And this is where I've constantly been trying to educate my clients by actually presenting scope sheets
Yeah.
to the client saying, hey, I went out and got 3 bids. And I threw in 1 bid from a guy that I will never use, but I just want you to see the product. So that way, if a client needs a smaller project done, they know what to look for as well
Yeah.
when it comes to evaluating a scope.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go through a scope, and I'll have, the 2 subs or the 2 trades that I've worked with a lot, and their scope sheets are 3-4 pages long. And then you get the guy that is doing it for $2,000 less, and their scope sheet is maybe like 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
And what that tells me is what's all the hidden costs, especially on a renovation, because you don't know what's behind a wall.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to go in and figure out X-ray vision within a house, so that way I knew exactly how to bid out a remodel job, but you don't know. And so what ends up happening when a client goes with a cheaper contractor is they get all those hidden costs start showing up. Oh, hey, we weren't accounting for this. We didn't account for this. We didn't account for this. All that adds up. And then the other thing too is most of those cheaper contractors, one, might not even be licensed. And when they're not licensed, they're not required by the state to have a warranty of a year on their workmanship.
Yeah.
So if something goes wrong and the client calls that contractor, oh, hey, the floor started bubbling up 2 weeks after, they can just completely ghost the client. And now the client has to go pay again to have it go fixed. So it's, that's been one of the biggest things that I've been trying to do in my business now is educating people. And COVID, as much as it was a terrible thing, it's helped me show people the difference.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because of COVID, that's driving construction cost up.
Yeah.
Materials, labor, everything, because of the biggest thing right now is labor shortage.
Yeah.
That's the biggest cost driver.
Yeah.
Because the guys that are very skilled, they now know, hey, I can go charge $45 an hour. Oh, I'm overbooked at $45 an hour. Okay, I'll charge $60 an hour. And it just keeps climbing. But when you want that high quality product, you end up paying for it.
Yeah.
And so the old adage of you get what you pay for.
Exactly.
It's so true right now.
Absolutely.
It's so true.
I'm always weary of, people who come in at extremely like low numbers because that quality is not going to be there. It's like the same thing like when real estate agents cut their commission. Well, like, do you actually know how to negotiate a contract? You could be losing out on, tens of thousands of dollars and stuff like that. So it's not always, smart to go with the cheapest option. I recommend like doing your research. Do your research on the actual person doing the work, not just, what they laid out and stuff like that. Because it can come back to, really bite you in the end when you're not using that person who has that knowledge and things like that. So you are a pretty young, like, general contractor. All the general contractors I've met have been like,
probably in their 40s.
Yeah, like 55. They're like crusty and stuff.
Yep.
No offense to anybody like that. So what's that challenge been like?
Well, it's been, it's definitely been difficult because, the stack of proof that I have behind me showing clients, hey, I know exactly how to manage a multi-million-dollar project is difficult. But the biggest thing that I've noticed to overcome that is being completely transparent with how I bill things. Communication is a huge thing. And so I think what I've noticed when I have clients that, we finally go under contract, the biggest thing is I am constantly communicating with them. I use a construction software or a construction management software called Builder Trend, which I'm still evolving and figuring out how to make that system a very efficient system.
Yeah.
And that allows me to be very transparent with my billing.
Which is super important.
It's huge.
GCs are known
for taking money and running.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you find a good GC, you have
Yeah.
to hang on, because I'm telling
Yeah.
you, there's plenty of people out there who are just like looking to take advantage. It's like a well-known thing. Like
Yep.
you talk to, investors and things like that, and they, it's rare to find a good GC.
Yeah.
It really is at the end of the day.
It is. And that's, that's where people see my age and they think that like, oh, is this guy, just some sort of like con man that's gonna, speaks really, highly.
That's when you got to pull up the Navy background.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I led, 30 people. You got to pull out the fit rep on them.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's definitely been a challenge. And I've probably lost, a good majority of work because people see, oh, hey, he's really young, but his price is a few $1,000s more than a guy that's, in his 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed and what's helping me more is being able to go in and educate clients. Some of the really well-known contractors that I follow on social media, they're saying, oh, charge for this, charge for this, charge for this. Well, right now, being as young as I am, I got to give a lot of education or knowledge away for free.
Yeah.
So people actually get, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
you have to build that trust over time.
Exactly.
With information.
Exactly. So that's been, it's definitely been a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm almost to that point where I will have enough proof behind me. The biggest thing right now too is everybody goes to social media to verify.
That's true.
And right now my social media is basically zero.
Yeah, you gotta get on social media, man. We gotta talk.
Well, and that's where, like, for me, because I am kind of shifting the work that I'm doing. I don't like I'm really tailoring towards what a designer that I interviewed actually said is a white glove service, where a client can come in and tell us, hey, here's the project. I either want to be involved very little or I want to be involved a lot.
Yeah.
And we take that in and we tailor our system to make that happen for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whenever, like right now, I have a client in Pungo that I'm working for, and we've built that relationship and that trust that they just tell me, hey, we're going to be out of town for the next 2 weeks. And I have all the codes to their house.
Yeah.
So that way we can keep the project rolling while they're out of town.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, the only time that I bother them, because this is what I've picked up on through several conversations, is they just want to be involved when it comes to design elements.
Yeah.
Paint colors, flooring options, which that's all up to them anyways. Yeah. And so, but again, everything else they don't want to be bothered by.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, scheduling around that too. So like moving existing mechanicals, making sure, hey, we're going to schedule this. Hey, there will be a little delay, but we're going to schedule it so that way we can move your hot water heaters while you're gone.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, it's that's been one, hopefully here too, because of that project, because it is a bigger project for us, we'll be able to get a lot of photography from it.
Yeah.
I'm planning on getting some drone footage and all of that to help with the social media side.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
things.
Definitely. You gotta let our social media guy know. He'll definitely look out for you.
Yeah.
It's a game changer. Just spreading the word of, you're delivering a good product. You're communicating with your clients. You're having that initial talk with them, like, setting that standard, like how involved do you want to be? Some people are like me, I'm like hands off. If I hire you, just keep me updated.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, time is money. So if I'm, in that project too much, then that's taken away from time from my family and stuff like that. So I think that's really good that you set that standard. And I think like any entrepreneurs should set that standard for their, customer, because every customer is going to be different.
Yeah.
You just got to know like who you're actually, working with, and it's similar to the military. Not all leaders are going to be the same.
Yep.
Some leaders are like really hands off, and other leaders you have to like report, every little thing to them and stuff like that, which it depends on your leadership style at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So as far as getting connected, I think you said you got connected with the 94 grad. Like, how did that happen? Because that's the main point of this podcast is to, have people reach out to you and really give back to the younger generation, or not even younger generation. Sometimes people are like the same age and stuff like that. So talk a little bit about how you made that connection, and how did he help you, grow as a, your construction company?
So I ended up meeting Tony, the builder in South Florida, through another connection that I met on the USNA property network page.
No kidding. No kidding. That's awesome.
I reached out to Don Pearson.
Yep.
And, did some work with him, for some of the financial stuff. And, just through communicating with him and expressing what I wanted my end goal to be for my company, he goes, "Oh, I know a guy in South Florida who's building these mansions."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I'd love to speak to him." Well, I finally got Tony on the phone, and I think within like a 25, 30-minute conversation with him, he was ready to fly me down there to basically do an interview.
That's crazy.
Because they were in need of superintendents for their projects. So went down there and met the team, loved the team, and loved the projects that they were doing. They were at the time doing a $2.5 million addition for a client on a private golf course.
Yeah.
Really cool to see like that side of the world, as well as building or remodeling a 16,000 square foot home in Manalapan, Florida. And just being able to go into these homes and kind of having the eye for just looking at everything around and being like, well, why is it built like that? Why is it built like that?
Yeah.
Being able to see those projects and talk with other superintendents within their company, it was eye-opening.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this will be great. So moved down there for 3 months and learned a ton about concrete and vertical concrete. And unfortunately, butted heads a lot with Tony's sons.
Yeah.
And Tony was, getting into a position where he's starting to basically give ownership to his sons. And so, just due to kind of different management styles, I figured it was best for me to step away.
Yeah.
I was able to learn a lot about high-end construction. Took away a lot of systems that they had in place that I knew I wanted to put in place for my own company, with a little bit of variation in it, because obviously I'm not working for a client that is building a $60 million home.
Yeah, not here.
Yeah. I mean, if there are, I would love to work for them.
Yeah.
But it was, I remember my parents would check in with me weekly because I told them, oh yeah, I'm moving down to Florida. It's going to be a whole new experience. And, they were nervous like any parents would be of their son just up and going.
Yeah.
And so they would call me, I think probably about weekly or every other week. Well, how's it going? And I would just be in awe, like just shocked and explaining how much I was learning. Because again, it was just a whole different style of construction.
Yeah.
Here it's all stick framed houses. Down there, it's all concrete and block.
Yeah.
Because again, they're building homes that need to withstand a hurricane.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was just cool seeing a completely different style of construction. And
which will probably come in handy when you're doing like commercial properties and stuff.
And that's, I would love to go into commercial, but to me, a lot of commercial construction is just all about money, and I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
I could really care less about how much I'm making, because at the end of the day, when I'm building a home for somebody, that this is going to be their forever home, like my client in Pungo.
Yeah.
they like they've mentioned this is our forever home. Well, it's awesome to be a part of building that and being able to provide them a space that they're going to love for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Whereas commercial construction, it's very transactional.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's it's just the way that I kind of tick. I like having that personable relationship
Yeah.
with clients and being able to build what I consider an art piece for them to live in for years.
Yeah, which
So,
I think is awesome because at the end of the day, it's it's the niche you decide to focus on. I texted you the other day and told you like I had a client for you. He's an investor,
Yeah.
and you told me like that I don't think I'm a good fit, which I like really respect that because you know what you want to do, you know what type of client you want. You want to build actual relationships
Yep.
with these people,
Yep.
which I think is ultimately the goal, right?
Yep.
Adding value to people. I contact people all the time just to check up on them. I don't want anything. I don't want to sell them anything. Don't want to sell them houses. Like I'm genuinely like checking up on people as a friend. And who knows? Like they might need something from me. I might need something from them. But you have to pour into these relationships and honestly stop being so transactional, especially if you're entrepreneur or a leader just in general. You have to focus on caring for people at the end of the day, and not just make it about like a dollar amount. So
exactly.
That's awesome that you're doing that. That's awesome that you turn my client down. I love when people turn. I was like, this dude is legit. He turned down business. I love it.
And that's the thing that I learned while I was down in Florida.
Yeah.
Because again, when I got into contracting up here, it was all about volume. That's how you're going to make your money, is all volume. And so when I went down there and I actually sat like in a client interview, so to speak, with Tony. And again, it was just a conversation. It wasn't, what's your budget? What's your timeline?
Yeah.
All this like very transactional speak, so to say. It was trying to get a feel for who the person was going to be and how they were going to react while the project was going on.
Yeah.
And so seeing that, it was like, okay, I truly need to figure out who I want to be working for, who I get along with the most, because construction's like a roller coaster. It's going to go great for a little while, and then it's going to be delayed, or there's going to run into issues. Like it's a given. There is going to be a time where something didn't go right.
Yeah.
And that's where having these client interviews is, you can get a feel for how are these people going to react when, shoot, we went $10,000 over budget on foundation because we weren't expecting to hit water this close to the surface. And so that's, I've figured out my target audience. It's still, obviously changing.
Yeah.
But that's what I've picked up is I know that I want to be a custom home builder, large scale remodeler, and I know the clients that I want to be working for, and so now it's nothing personal.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't like you, I'm not going to work for you type of thing, but it's just I don't think I would be a great fit.
Yeah.
I think we'll butt heads a lot, which will make your experience terrible.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't want to do. I want to have a relationship with clients that, holy cow, this was the greatest experience ever.
Yeah.
And then with that word of mouth, advertising, so to speak, I'll be able to do more projects, more art pieces, for clients. So
you really want to, build your business based off of referrals from people you actually like enjoy doing work for.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think that's business in a nutshell. Some people do go after volume, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're kind of like me. I believe in, building deeper relationships. I like I said before, I reach out to people all the time. I have a database. I do have a database, right? But it's not based off of like business. I want to check in on you, right?
Yeah.
I want to see like how you're doing, especially with Navy people and stuff like that, because
Yeah.
you never know. Like being in the Navy is hard. You work
Yeah.
long hours.
Yeah.
Mental health is like an issue in the
Yep.
Navy, so it's just really reaching out to those people and connecting on a deeper level.
Yeah.
One time when I was reaching out, just doing my reaching out, I reach out to people at least once a quarter just to check up on them,
Yeah.
right? And I was doing my reach out, and I had one of my friends, thinking about like committing suicide. So, which really touched me. We
Mhm.
got him the help he really needed, but it's that level of commitment. It's not
Yeah.
about business. I could care less about
Yeah.
business, man.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day. So.
Well, and I think too, as business owners, I think in today's in today's generation, I think realistically, if you can show people that you genuinely care about them,
Mhm.
the business will do just fine.
Yeah.
Without having to really like focus hard on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the contracting world, I didn't really think that building those personal relationships, starting out with, that it was gonna lead me to bringing in more leads, more projects, all that. But just communicating with, heck, my garage door guy.
Yeah.
I've gotten more trades through him that I go to all the time now because I went and had a beer with him.
Yeah.
I didn't care to get anything from him. He wasn't trying to get business from me,
Mm-hmm.
and we went and had pizza and a beer.
Yeah.
And that was it. And now it's that relationship has developed into he's getting a lot more work, I'm getting a lot more work, and it was mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And it was just because, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing nothing. All right, let's go grab lunch. All
Yeah.
right, that sounds good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah. So I think, for any of the younger goats out there, having a true passion for what you do, I think is huge, and being able to show people that you genuinely care about them or the product that you're pushing out is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this can pertain to entrepreneurship. It can pertain to you staying in the Navy or working corporate life. Like there's no right or wrong answer. Not everybody has to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I believe everybody should invest, right?
Yeah.
But I know plenty of people who are either active duty or working corporate America and still make passive income. They're building towards that passive income, whether it's through stock, syndications, or investing into businesses.
Yeah.
Just because you invest into a business doesn't mean you have to operate that business. So they love what they do. They're fine with staying in the Navy, and I think people should be fine what they really are passionate about, and they really love doing. So I think too frequently we get on like Instagram and you see like highlights and people making millions. Like at the end of the day, like people portray, because no disrespect to anybody, but the average income per month in America is like $5,000, and then I hop on Instagram and like everybody's a millionaire. So something's not something's not right. So I always say, like, don't get caught up in the hype. It's okay to work a 9-to-5 job
100%.
and still passively invest. There's nothing wrong with that, and live a happy life. So I think that's really important. So talk about a little bit about a tough time you had as a contractor. I'm talking about like, it's all good to hear about like the good and what you're building and stuff. No. Tell me about a tough time.
So there was, it was actually when I was still in the Navy. It was, during COVID. So I was like, oh, construction is considered essential now. So I could start doing some projects on the side.
Yeah.
Was a licensed contractor and started doing some work for, friends and family, so to speak. And the hardest time was I didn't have my scheduling figured out at all. No idea. Like scheduling wise, because again, whenever I would go into a project, it's like, okay, you want me to remodel your bathroom? Okay, I can guess that it's going to take 4 weeks,
Yeah.
but who knows what's going to happen when I tear out a wall and like termites are all, eating through all the studs. Well, there goes, the 4 week lead, timeline that I thought I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was starting a job, and it was actually for a TV show, believe it or not.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And it was, yeah, that's a whole different story. But basically, started this job for a TV show, and during that TV show that I was helping out with, I got contacted to come basically manage and bring a project back to back to a baseline for a schedule, and it was on a $2.5 million house.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is exactly what I want to get into is your high-end luxury homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so went and started that job and had no idea how long that job would take because I was coming in like halfway through it.
Yeah.
And during that, I didn't even sign a contract, but I had bid out a job. And during that, I kept pushing them back. I said, sorry, like this project's still going. This project's still going. I'm sorry. Like I'm still very new to this when it comes to scheduling. So like I have no idea what I'm really doing.
Yeah.
And finally I'd pushed them back 6 months.
Yeah.
And we were coming up,
which is probably like normal for, I feel like, COVID time period. Like
yeah, yeah,
that was like normal.
Yeah. I mean, even nowadays, contractors are still backlogged by like 8 months.
Yeah.
But I had gotten to the point where, holy crap, I've pushed them back 6 months. I told them I would start this day, and hey, I'm going to need another 4 weeks. Hey, I'm going to need another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I finally got to the point where I was coming up on their start time, and I'm still on this job.
Yeah.
And I finally tell them, I say, hey, look, I'm sorry. I can't, I don't want to keep pushing you back because I could push you back for another 6 months.
Yeah.
And you could have already had your job done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally told them, I said, hey, look, like, I can't do your job right now because I don't know what my schedule looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And they were very upset with me because I wasn't upfront about it before.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went and totally bashed me on Google reviews. Mm-hmm. And I was so furious because I was just starting out. I still didn't fully commit to being a contractor yet.
Yeah.
And I'm already getting, bad reviews.
Yeah.
And so I was furious.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reaching out to my mentor and going, what do I do? Because I would love to just go off on this person.
Yeah.
Because why would you bash somebody that's just starting a business?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to be a little bit lenient. And so the best piece of advice that I got for that was go ahead and respond in a professional manner, just explaining your point of view.
Yeah.
Leave out all emotion, leave out all of that, and just, respond that way. Yeah. And so I did that, but maybe it was a pride thing or an ego thing because I'd failed.
Yeah.
In my eyes, I'd failed.
Mm-hmm.
That it just ate me alive.
Yeah.
And so now I'm definitely way more cautious about how much work I bring on. Mm-hmm. Especially right now because the team, I'm just now starting to interview other superintendents, designers, actually starting to develop the team because I know exactly where I want to take the company now.
Yeah.
But that was the hardest thing to do, was to basically swallow my pride and say, I screwed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I screwed up. I'm sorry. Even now, there was a couple times when I actually got back to Virginia, I had partnered up with a guy, and this is where I should have done more research into him. He was a guy that it was all about quick money. And so he kept wanting to, build fences and decks. And it's like, dude, that's not what I want to do. If we stay like partnered up though, like we could do very well. He was super concerned. Hey, we have no money coming in. We have no money coming in. It's like, yeah, I know, but I just got back. We're starting to work towards working on, $200,000 projects, $300,000 projects. Like, just relax, like trust the process. And he ended up getting 3 clients under contract for like a deck and 2 fences. And again, absolutely hated it because we ended up splitting ties.
Mhm.
I had to call those 3 clients and basically say, hey, I'm sorry, like this isn't what our company does.
Mhm.
I apologize for the inconvenience. And at least what I found that helped smooth things over a little bit was I sent them gift cards to Home Depot because I felt so bad.
Yeah.
So hopefully I don't get to a point where that really bites me in the butt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's that those 2 times have been the hardest time because again, hey, I've not necessarily promised, but I've said I would do something.
Yeah.
And to me, sticking by your word is huge.
Yeah.
Growing up in Central Kansas, of all places, your word and a handshake meant a lot. That it when I basically tell them, hey, I can't do it anymore, it sucked.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
and I think that's important for you to self-assess because as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be perfect, right? At the end of the day, and when you do make a mistake, I was like the same way when I first started out with real estate. When I did make a mistake, I would admit to it, and is there any way I can compensate you or anything? But you have to do some self-reflection at the end of the day to make your business better, to make your systems better, and everything like that. I would imagine now if somebody came with, you even proved it when I messaged you. You were like, "No,
yeah,
I don't think this is a good fit." So I can personally tell that you definitely learned that lesson, and that's what life is about: is learning lessons and making those course corrections to run a more efficient business and stuff like that. So I think that's huge. That's huge.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the process like to become a general contractor, to start a construction company?
So it varies from state to state. So like Virginia, you have to be licensed in order to conduct any sort of work on a house that exceeds $1,000.
Yeah.
How
long does licensing take?
So I got after it.
Okay.
And granted, it was in the middle of COVID too, so I had all the time in the world.
And you were used to doing work.
Exactly.
So it's a little bit different.
Exactly. So I already had the experience behind me. And so basically in the state of Virginia, there is 3 different classes. So you have your Class A, B, and C. And basically all that means, and something that I would tell viewers to check your contractors for the class that they have, because the class just designates how big of a project you can do. I think Class C, you can only do a project up to $10,000. Class B is up to $120,000, and then Class A is unlimited. So you have your 3 classes, and then you have your specialties. So like my specialty is a residential building contractor. There is your commercial building contractor, which is a CBC. You have, highway heavy. So they do road construction, basically.
Okay.
And they also have all the specialties, so drywall, framing, they have all those as well. And so for my license, what I ended up having to do, because I went for a Class A RBC license, is I had to, one, prove that I had 5 years of actual experience in the field. I had to show that I was fiscally responsible, you could show that you had a net worth of $45,000 or obtain a surety bond for $50,000. And when you're starting out, the surety bond is the way to go. So then you have to, for your Class A and your Class B, you have to take basically a business law and management exam, and you have to take your trade exam.
Okay.
And basically those exams, for the business exam, it was a lot of accounting and a lot of labor laws.
Yeah.
Which in construction is very important.
Yeah.
Because construction is a pretty dangerous occupation. So knowing how insurance works, workers' comp, all of that is tested on. And then your trade is, for a RBC, it is all about the code book. So you've got a code book that is probably like 2.5 inches thick.
Yeah.
And the writing is like font 8. Like you've got to get a magnifying glass to look through it.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to basically research through that book within, I think it's like 90 minutes. And you have to basically find, I think it was like 70 answers on the code book in 90 minutes. And you gotta know exactly
That
where
sounds
you're
intense.
going.
I'm not gonna lie.
It's well, so that it's where the supply corps helped me out because all of our tests were open book.
Yeah.
And so you just had to find you got to know the resource that it's coming from and where to find it in that resource.
Yeah.
And so
Instructions, as they say in the Navy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what they're called. But basically you have to take the 3 exams and pass all those, and then your application then can be submitted to the contracting board.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, this board will convene and look through all the applications and decide whether or not they're going to give you a license.
Man, that sounds intense. That sounds intense.
So now states like Texas, you don't have to have a license. It's scary.
Of course.
It's scary.
Yeah.
But the big thing that they go on is I think you have to register, and you have to have you have to prove insurance.
Gotcha.
So I've looked into getting a license in Texas to be closer to home.
Yeah.
But I just know Virginia so well now that it's like, all right, I'll just stay here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have like a lot of investors that are on the network, USNA Property Network and stuff like that, and also that listen to the podcast. So you do like a lot of renovations. So what are the big ticket items they should like look out for when purchasing like a rehab property or a property just in general? Because, I mean, you essentially build houses from the ground up and remodel and stuff like that. So give some, like, high-level, items.
When I first go into a house, and I'm trying to think. Like, I just went through a property yesterday, actually. But it was an old, rundown house, so I knew it was going to be in shambles. Mm-hmm. But if I'm going into a house that's, we'll say, middle of the pack, that is not super old, and not new construction, but has been built in the last 20 years or so. Mm-hmm. The first thing I look for is cracking in drywall.
Okay.
I look at every single corner. I look above and below windows, above doors. I'm always looking for cracking in drywall because most of the time the house is still settling.
Yeah.
But if it's a large enough crack, there's a foundation issue.
Yeah, structural. Yeah.
Which, as a contractor, whenever because I'm constantly looking at properties to put into my portfolio as well, but at a slower rate.
Yeah, yeah.
If the bones of the house, so your foundation, your structural members, and your roof are in good condition, typically that's what I consider a good house.
Yeah.
To flip.
Okay.
So whenever I go into a house and I see significant cracking in drywall, or I see what we call nail pops, so you can actually see where the screws went into the studs through the drywall. Seeing those, it raises a flag. Like, okay, I hate going under a house to look at crawl spaces, but I got to go look under the house.
Yeah.
So then you look at the foundation if you see that. If you don't see that, then what I start looking at is I go into the upper floor and I start looking for water spots.
Okay.
Now this can all be done kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
But then I'm looking for water spots. And if I see water in an upper floor, obviously there's something with the roof.
Yep.
And I won't name any companies just for any potential lawsuits, but there are several volume builders in this area that any chance that I get, I try and push clients away from.
Yep.
Because
I'm tracking on those.
Yeah, because my client now, they told me, yeah, we lived in one of their homes and they were going to bring a class action lawsuit, and their lawyer basically said, bring it on. We've got more lawyers than you.
Yeah.
But anyways, side note. But you look for any sort of, leaking in the roof, because again, water is the nemesis of a house.
Mm-hmm.
It'll destroy everything. Wood, drywall, everything. Foundation issues. Water is all the culprit typically for that, and especially in this area because the water table is so high.
Yep.
And so looking for, water spots. And then the other thing that I look at too is I always go into bathrooms, and I don't necessarily jump around on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of give a little bit of a jump
Mm-hmm.
to see if it flexes any.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time that is where water is not contained, so it's not in a pipe, or that's where you get most of your moisture issues is in bathrooms, kitchens as well, because again, you've got water in that area that is not contained anymore once it leaves the faucet. And if you can kind of pass all those, it's definitely a house worth looking at your numbers for.
Yeah.
And some of the other things that I look at too in like really old houses is I look at the electrical, because if you go into a house that is really old, it'll most likely have just a 2-pronged outlet instead of 3.
And that costs a couple $1,000s to upgrade, correct?
It's expensive. Yeah. And what I think too when it comes to electrical is where I don't mess around when it comes to trying to be cheap.
Yeah.
Or looking to save money there.
It's kind of like plumbing.
Yeah. Like all your MEPs. So like mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of those, that's where I never skimp out on those, because that's where somebody could get seriously hurt.
Yeah.
And so if you see, because there are ways to actually put a 3-pronged outlet into an electrical box that only has 2 wires coming into it.
Yeah.
There's a way to kind of jumper around things. But I would highly avoid that, because it'll just bring you a lawsuit, because somebody will get hurt because they'll overload that circuit, or they'll overload the cable itself, and the cable will catch on fire.
Yeah.
And then your house is burned down.
Yeah.
So those are like, I would say, the MEPs are the big thing. If you have a really old furnace, I typically take those out, because, if it was like my house, it was built in 58 in terrible condition, but I was like, it's in a really nice neighborhood. I can fix it up. The furnace, I think it actually called it quits on me the first winter that I was here. And the thing is, a lot of HVAC companies will raise their prices based on the seasons.
Yeah.
So AC work that is being done in the summer it
takes a long time too. I know from experience.
Yeah. Exactly. And me personally, I consider that price gouging, but again, it's also being smart as a businessman, making sure like, hey, we're going to get a lot of calls for air conditioning. Oh, we're going to get a lot of calls for heating. So they do fluctuate those. So I remember spending, I think it was like $9,000 to have a new furnace put into my house.
Yeah.
So that's, anything that, I always say anything that's like over 10 years old, I just go ahead and replace.
Okay.
Just because it's like an insurance thing, and depending on your strategy, I guess too. If you're looking to hold the place for long term, just replace it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to go out.
Yeah.
And that's my threshold is 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely. What's one piece of advice you would, leave second class Nick sitting in Bancroft Hall? What's one piece of advice? The one thing.
Man, so I've said this so many times, and when I was at the academy, I took things so serious. I was so scared to get kicked out. I was so scared to get in trouble, get put on restriction.
Yeah.
But looking back at it, I wish I would have, definitely been
not got kicked out.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I definitely wouldn't have wanted to get kicked out. But it was, I wish I wouldn't have taken things so seriously.
Yeah.
I wish I would have enjoyed it more.
Yeah.
Because I was, it was sports, school.
Yeah.
I would go out occasionally on weekends, but I was, in my room catching up on homework that I was behind on.
Yeah.
So that's, I would say that's probably one thing is I was so scared to get put on restriction when in reality it's like, okay, like not the biggest deal, especially when you get out to the fleet and it's like, wow, people get away with a lot more.
Yeah,
than
yeah,
what we
definitely,
did.
definitely. And I think
So,
that's just true, just in general in life. I
mhm.
think people like beat themselves up too much, or
Yeah,
too focused on like their goals.
yeah,
Like a goal is like a, it's an object you're trying to reach,
yeah,
right? And if you don't reach that object, it's okay, because as high performers, I think we like beat ourselves up too
yeah.
much about this, this goal that we want to achieve. In
Hmm.
reality, we're making, progress.
Yeah.
So which progress is the most important thing. As long as you're getting better every day, I think that's huge. There's a good book out there called, I think it's called The Gap in the Gain. By
I've heard of that.
Dan
Yeah.
Sullivan. It's a great one for higher achievers and stuff
Mhm.
like that, because it really puts things into perspective. So
Yeah.
I
And
think,
that's, I mean, I agree with you 100% on the goal. And to add on to that, I've, a couple podcasts that people have sent me because, I've voiced my opinion to a lot of my closer friends saying, I don't feel like I'm where I should be. I've put
mhm.
in all this work and I still feel like I'm just starting.
Yeah,
And the biggest thing that I've taken away from some of those is it's time too.
mhm.
Everybody is on a different timeline. And so as long as you're being consistent and just taking a step towards that goal,
Yeah,
you'll eventually get there.
yeah,
You might not get there, next week,
yeah,
but you're going to get there. And it's just I think we're Naval Academy grads, or even military members, where discipline's instilled in us,
mhm.
and just being disciplined in the consistency of making progress
Yeah,
is huge.
yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely. Well, Nick, I appreciate you, coming on the show, dropping the knowledge and everything
yeah.
like that. So tell the goats where they can, find you on social media and stuff like that.
So I do have Facebook, Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got website at deterdingconstruction.com that people can reach me at. My accounts are not very active, but I'm on.
We're gonna
there.
change that. We're
Yeah,
gonna change that.
yeah,
We're gonna change that.
we're working on that. So, but I can be reached there, and even even my website now has my phone number too. People can text me. It is my work cell phone, but it all comes to me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, definitely, definitely. Again, I appreciate you, coming on the show, giving the knowledge and everything like that. And remember, relationships are the most important currency. This is Joffrey Whiteside signing out.